Hello everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, A Battle Between Creativity and Strategy, Insights from TBR's Digital Marketing Services Benchmark. I'm Justin Surgent, and I'm hosting today's session. Marketing teams are shifting strategies and budgets to new digital channels, and IT and strategy vendors are challenging traditional agencies for the new IT-enabled business. This webinar will focus on findings from TBR's inaugural Digital Marketing Services Benchmark, highlighting the progress new entrants have made with their strategies, including in leading segments and services, and the different approaches driving success in digital marketing services. The presentation will also highlight areas where traditional agencies can design value propositions to win enterprise marketing dollars. Now, before we begin the presentation, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we'll be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A function. We will address them at the end of the presentation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webinar within 24 hours of the conclusion of the presentation. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on SlideShare at slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce the analyst presenting today. Boz Hristov is an analyst at TBR's professional services practice and TBR's digital marketing services research, provides TBR's digital marketing services research on digital marketing services vendor profiles, digital marketing services benchmark, digital marketing services customer buying behavior, and global delivery benchmark. Patrick Heffernan is a principal analyst here in TBR's professional services practice and directs the practice's syndicated portfolio and cultivates and manages projects on topics ranging from management consulting to firms' financial advisory services to emerging technologies. And Stuart serves as Vice President of Research, engaging TBR clients to promote the value of business insight that helps them improve business performance, capture opportunity, and increase customer engagement. He also leads the TBR digital practice, which produces both the ad tech and digital marketing services benchmarks. And with that, let me hand this over to the analyst.
Thank you, Justin. This is Stuart Williams, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Digital technology is beginning to be rapidly adopted and is transforming the way that enterprises are performing their job functions. The integration of cloud, analytics, the Internet of Things, mobile technologies, networking, and social technologies into solution sets that directly tap into the functions that are needed to be performed by different line of business executives or functional executives, say in marketing, supply chain, e-commerce, manufacturing, etc., industry by industry and function by function, are rapidly changing the workforce and opening up new opportunities for IT, strategy, and creative services companies to tap into new pools of money. TBR is entering this space by looking at the go-to-market functions, notably the way marketing is being transformed through the application of advertising technology, marketing technology, and wrapped around those are the digital marketing professionals and IT services that are helping firms either make the transition strategically or helping them with the implementation of those changes as they mature. So we see thousands of vendors on the tech side beginning to create different applications, solutions, and services for helping the marketing function make its transition. And we see many of the IT services firms running into a convergence space in their attempt to help the enterprises with their transformation. So today we're going to focus on how the service firms are beginning to compete and the intersection of their value propositions as they compete for many of the same service line businesses. So we're going to drill into that and provide some data from our benchmarks that illustrate how that competition is proceeding and provide you with some insight into how that is going to be driven, what the success criteria are, and some positioning of specific vendors in this space. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Patrick Heffernan.
Great, thanks, Stuart, and thanks everybody for joining. And you can see here, as Stuart said, we're going to walk through first some definitions so that we all understand what the space is that we're talking about and how we're talking about it. This is the, well, I'll get to the definitions in a moment. Then we're gonna look at the broadest trends, and then we'll drill down into some specifics and speculate a bit on what we think is gonna happen this year and next year. So digital marketing services is a new benchmark for TBR. We issued our first edition of it in March of this year. So what we need to do, for a lot of folks that have been on webinars with us before, it's pretty established what we're talking about and what the different service lines are and the vendors that we're covering or the space we're covering. But since this is new, we wanted to sort of set the stage about what it is that we're actually talking about. There are 4 service lines in digital marketing services by our taxonomy, and it basically goes from the question, what should we do, all the way through measuring, well, how well did we do what it was that we did. That takes you from strategy all the way down through analytics. We're going to come back to these definitions later if there are questions about what fits into where, but I wanted to make sure that everybody saw this is how we look at the digital marketing services world and what we're going to be talking about. So this is at the very highest level. This is sort of how we see probably one of the biggest trends in digital marketing services. So you have Paris, you have the high fashion world, you have the creative types, you have the artistic types, and then you have New York, you have Wall Street, you have people getting business done. And I say that with all due respect to the French who hosted me last week, so I shouldn't, not to disparage France at all, just using this, of course, as an illustration. But what that really means in practice for digital marketing services is that we see 2 very distinct groups here. We see the legacy ad agencies, which are the creative types. They're the ones that have made their brand, they've made their money, they've made their name on being able to provide branding and creative services around marketing as a whole. So as digital has permeated through all of IT and including into marketing, these guys, these traditional ad agencies, are relying on those creative and branding capabilities that they do so well. In contrast, you have digital permeating through everything in IT, and you have companies like Accenture, IBM, Deloitte, McKinsey, BCG, PwC, who have made their money and made their brand on being able to implement technology, on being able to provide the strategic advice of what should a company do, particularly around IT, and how should they make it work. And so what we see here is the contrast between the companies that built their brand by providing brand and creative services and companies that built their brand by being able to do strategy all the way down through implementation. Again, this is at the highest level, and it may seem simplistic when you look at it here, but when we turn it over to Boz, you're going to see that picture is actually incredibly stark when we break it down into the actual metrics that we use to look at this space. So with that, I will turn it over to Boz.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Patrick was trying to simplify the picture, I'll try to drill down a little bit further down and kind of provide some more granularity around the vendors as well as the metrics that we look into and who's winning and who's positioning how to win in the next stages of the market. On the slide that you're looking at right now, just to kind of clarify, the numbers in terms of digital marketing services revenue, first of all, those are for the 16 vendors that we cover in the benchmark, which in TBR estimates roughly represent around 30% of the current digital marketing services market. We try to identify the early entrants, the legacy agencies, and the ones that are making investments to successfully compete and see what are they doing to better position themselves. The growth rate, we can see kind of like the standing out from those service lines, and in terms of how the market is trending, it's certainly a startup type phase market essentially. And what's driving that startup type growth is especially clients that are auditing their marketing, existing marketing vendors. They are looking at marketing as more of a part of a digital transformation engagement, and that has created opportunities for a lot of the IT services-centric vendors like Accenture and IBM and CGI and Deloitte to really kind of beef up their capabilities around that and be like, okay, we can go to the C-suite and talk to you about it and kind of see how we can deliver not just digital marketing service, but be part of a whole holistic digital transformation engagement. The two service lines that are kind of standing out here, looking at that slide, is the creative and branding and strategy. We have identified those as the fastest growing right now, and that kind of ties up to what I just made a comment on. Strategy is what the IT services vendors are good at, and the strategy how they're good at. And the creative and branding is where actually the legacy of the digital marketing agencies are playing. And that kind of creates that battle and the tale of two cities that Patrick just spoke about, which I want to go through the next 3 slides and kind of highlight the 3 different groups of vendors that we have identified. So you go to the next slide, please. So the first group is the strategy-led vendors, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, PwC, and EY. Certainly growing from a smaller base, but growing a lot of the fastest growing vendors in the benchmark, with the exception of EY, which is still kind of trying to realign its technology consulting portfolio, but the rest of them are growing fast and they are capturing share of the strategy piece, especially the strategy consulting piece, that they do well. What allows them to do that is really their permission to play with the C-suite. And as I mentioned earlier, it's part of that overarching picture of like, okay, McKinsey is going to the C-level executive, you're like, okay, well, we have digital capabilities. We're probably not going to play entirely in the SI space, but we can have that permission. We can discuss transformation, and maybe that's an opportunity for an agency to step in and partner with McKinsey or BCG and be like, we can go to and partner together. But having that permission to play certainly was driving the opportunities and creating that fast growth. PwC is the one kind of stands out, and you're probably not familiar with. They acquired Booz & Company about a year ago. They integrated Booz & Digital within their operations. And that certainly gave a boost in overall performance as PwC Technology Consulting and PwC Digital, which was kind of like part of the launch of the PwC process. So it's really allowing PwC to address trends as fixed run and solve business problem engagements that are part of that overarching digital transformation. On the next slide is the second group of vendors that we covered in the benchmark. We have the IT services-led vendors, and that's I think the group we should kind of highlight, not to discount the rest of the groups, but those are the kind of the most interesting group to see how IT services-centric vendors like Accenture, IBM, and Deloitte, and kind of highlighting Deloitte and putting Deloitte in that group for a reason, which we'll touch base in a moment, but it's interesting how they're able to scale up their capabilities, and what allowed them to do that is their brand, which allowed them to hire and acquire professionals, particularly around creative and branding, which was the service line that they lacked. Probably, if you think about 5 years or 7 years ago, you probably not think about Deloitte or IBM being in that category. Be like, okay, we're going to be going after those engagements, but they identified that as an opportunity for them, and also to cross-sell and upsell system integration services from their professional services bucket, which allowed them to be like, okay, let's go and see where those marketing dollars are going and how we can capture them, and that's what they've been doing. Just to kind of highlight some examples, I mean, Accenture has been building the digital marketing capabilities through inorganic push. They acquired Acuity Group, Procurian, so they've been certainly expanding their portfolio and ending capabilities that they've been lacking through acquisitions mainly. IBM, it's good what they do. They do well with repeatable base IP, and baked with under the interactive experience unit group, they're able to reach there and generate high profits in the market. Deloitte on its own, it's kind of standing out on the far right of the chart. The reason being is Deloitte has an interesting structure. I mean, first of all, it's a member firm group. I mean, it's a partnership that it's a combination of 47 firms across the globe. But Deloitte launched Deloitte Digital back in 2012, and it's been kind of running on its own as a separate agency, but still positioned itself as a digital consulting agency, which leads us to believe that it still leverages the Deloitte brand when it goes to the C-suite. It still leverages the scale and the footprint that Deloitte has to go when it comes to professional services. But at the same time, in the back end, it's been building its creative and branding capabilities. It's been building its advertising analytic capabilities. And when we look at the Deloitte digital portfolio, it's well balanced. It's well balanced across all the 4 lines of business, and that led us to put them in the category with IBM and Accenture rather than being in the strategy-led vendors. And on the next slide, what I'll talk about is the legacy digital marketing agencies. I mean, those are the players, the vendors who've been in the space for a while. Those have been vendors who know the space well, and they still have a really solid client base that they serve well. But their growth has slowed down, and we can see that being on the far left of the chart. I mean, you can see the size of Digitas and Sapient Nitro, and all of these guys still staying with a fast growth, but those are legacy agencies that are really creative and branding is their bread and butter. But with the advent of IT services vendors, that has created some headwinds for their growth, and some of them have tried to address that through developing more of a holistic approach. And we have highlighted here the Publicis Group vendors, part of the holding company Publicis, Digitas, Sapient Nitro, and Razorfish. What they did was last November, after Publicis acquired Sapient Nitro, which was sort of the last standing independent digital marketing agency, acquired it for $3 billion. What Publicis did was develop that holistic platform that folded the brands between Digitas, LBI, Razorfish, Global, Sapient Nitro, Global Markets, and Government Services under one umbrella. They still run and operate as an independent agency, but developing that Publicis, that Sapient platform is kind of a way to showcase Publicis is really keeping the finger on the pulse of the market, and like, okay, well, we know that IBM and Accenture and Deloitte, what they have started building over the last couple of years, we need to react to that threat and kind of reverse and resurgence our growth in the space that we have owned for so many years. And it's certainly a trend that we keep an eye as well, that we believe we see also more of a consolidation of those agencies. It's kind of still too early in the stage, but we keep an eye and kind of see what the agencies and how they'll will be doing and how they'll be reacting to threats that the IT services vendors and strategy-led vendors are creating for them. Well, with that, we'll turn it over to Stuart.
Thank you, Boz. So we have the multiple players, and we've shown you the landscape. Now, when we look ahead at the participation and the growth rates and the mix of revenue for these firms, we've developed this view to begin to tell the story about what's happening as these firms go forward. So the bars on this chart are not indicative of the actual measurement, they're just relative. We think about the 3 different types of players on the left: strategy, IT services centric, and agencies. We see that, you know, the agencies have very powerful legacy cash flows and strong business in these areas, but their growth is lower than that of the relatively smaller strategy firms, which are higher growth off of that smaller base. So the story here, you know, we felt like this really described, you know, this kind of 3 different positions, but the 2 different groups that are tied together most closely are the strategy and the IT services firms. So when we think about how the space is going to evolve, we see 3 different types of scenarios playing out. The strategy firms really being drawn into this space because of the overall transformation that's happening in the go-to-market functions, not just marketing, there's advertising, the integration with the back office, bringing in the Internet of Things and other sources of data, tremendous transformation in the business process and the way businesses do their models. Bringing their relationships with the C-suite really creates the overall permission to play for them to drive and grow their business and to reach further down and to increase the range of the transformation strategies that they're beginning to drive. We don't see them beginning to aspire to becoming agencies or IT services vendors, and that creates ecosystem opportunities for, particularly for the IT services vendors, to help the strategy vendors begin to move in and implement the transformation policies and plans that they're laying out. Now, recognizing that there are thousands of individual solution vendors in this space, lots of different transformation. When we talk to CMOs, we hear that, they have between 20 or 30 or even more point solutions that are being used across the marketing life cycle. There's a huge opportunity here for them to become more integrated, to standardize, and for the evolution of more complete suites on the part of the actual core platform providers. So IT services firms, if they are in this space, are beginning to staff up. Several of them are adding agency capabilities to lead those conversations. They're certainly beginning to recognize and chase the opportunity here, and it's a two-pronged approach on the part of several of the firms, particularly firms like Accenture and IBM. They're better positioned to win this because it's a technology-driven transformation. So they have a leg up in that conversation, and it's a transformation that will happen regardless of whether there's a strategy in place, right? So firms that will embark on this will recognize the mess that they're in and begin to call for help in the growth of that process. We do see a need for strategy, and obviously I think the CEO and the CMOs are going to want to have that in play, but I think it's going to happen regardless. Then there's the agencies. So marketers have traditionally done all of the internal work inside the firm around the lead generation, and turn to the agencies for that outreach to the customer base, the people that they don't know, people that they need to reach to, the creative services for launching and managing the campaigns. Marketing officers don't want to become competent in actually executing those, and they want to be able to move between agency to agency. So as the CMOs are moving towards wanting to use digital channels, the agencies have reacted to provide those types of tools. And they're seeking to drive revenue growth in this space because frankly, in many ways, the dollars are shifting on their traditional advertising budgets, and they want to retain more exclusive relationships with their customers so they don't churn over time. We see a big opportunity for the strategy firms and the agencies to begin to work together because they're very complementary in this space. And that from their point of view, the agencies could actually get an alliance to bulk up their IT services delivery strategy and let the lead be either the strategy or the agency creative piece. So this dynamic, this tension between the agencies and then the more traditional IT-centric firms really is the core of the argument that we're putting out today that we see being played out. And this is the challenge that's being really played out in the minds of the CMO. Do I go with a strategy firm? Do I go with an Accenture? Do I go with Ogilvy and Mather? These are really key questions, and since each firm differentiates itself in a different way and staffs up its services in a different way and actually delivers in different modes, it's very hard for the CMO to make the selections here. So we see a period where firms really need to be diligent in the description and articulation of their value propositions. So this slide really captures a lot of the dynamics that are happening in this space, and certainly we'd love to follow up with folks on the call to talk about how they perceive themselves and how they can give them advice about how to make the next move.
One other thing that I would add in here is that when you look at what's happening in the IT services-centric providers, is it mentions talent on both sides of that they are acquiring talent. We've heard over the last couple of years moves that IBM and Accenture in particular, and Deloitte as well, have made to acquire that creative and branding talent, that legacy ad agency talent, and build it up within their own organizations. What I think will be interesting to see, what we'll keep a very close eye on, is how long that talent stays and how well that talent thrives. Accenture and IBM and Deloitte and others in that group are not, their business model, their structure, the way that those firms run is not necessarily the kind of thing that the creative and branding types that are coming from legacy ad agencies will necessarily do well under. It's possible that what we'll see is a bit of an exodus of folks that very top-level talent that was lured over to an IT services-centric organization with the opportunity to build something big in digital, but as digital plays out, as digital marketing services plays out, and maybe if we see more of a relationship, more of an alliance between the creative and branding types and the strategy types, there may be an opportunity for those folks to go back to a business model, to an organization that they're more comfortable with. Not to say that IBM and Accenture and Deloitte aren't attractive in their own right, but it certainly is a different kind of setup for those folks. It's something it's worth keeping an eye on as especially the more high-profile folks move around.
So on the next couple of slides is kind of still part of that discussion. I want to talk about different approaches the vendors are taking, and when we look at typical go-to-market strategy, we have the ally, the buy, and the R&D, and certainly the ally and the buy are the two approaches that vendors prefer to take in many cases because it gives them the speed and the scale of an IP and or fill in the gaps of their portfolio that they would. If they have to go through R&D, it's too expensive, and it's too risky sometimes. So especially digital marketing services space being in the nascent stage as it is, vendors are looking to explore the ally and buy approach first. Not that they're not going after R&D, but they certainly prefer it as at least what we have identified here in the benchmark. So the first, on the slide here, we have highlighted some of the acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions that vendors and kind of what's going on and why they're pursuing those acquisitions. So what are the key areas that vendors are pursuing. So just a few examples just to kind of give you an idea why and who's doing what. I mean, Ogilvy and Mather acquired Blue Digital, and it's a South Africa agency. What it gives is that regional presence. South Africa is an emerging stage market. Certainly a lot of opportunities around web, mobile, and commerce that are driving, and that's what Ogilvy is looking at, and that's kind of like positioning them, okay, we need that scale, there's an opportunity for us, let's go. It's going to give us technology lag, and it's going to give us in a market that is growing rapidly. Accenture acquired the Acuity Group, as I mentioned earlier, which really deepens the core capabilities and create more opportunities within not just the digital marketing, but also within their communication, media, and technology operating group. Deloitte Digital acquired Banyan Branch, certainly an agency that bolstered Deloitte's design and e-commerce capabilities. Banyan and it kind of filled up the gap across social analytics, community management, creative design, social solutions, and then we have Crown Partners, which was an acquisition that is kind of an example we just spoke about earlier, an agency acquiring a strategy-led vendor. Crown Partners is about 150 technology consulting professionals. They're not pure strategy like McKinsey or Bain, but they have a consulting capabilities with a focus on technology. So Razorfish acquired Crown Partners. I would not be surprised if we continue to see that trend from digital agencies, unless they go after alliances, which we want to talk about on the next slide and kind of give some examples of the alliance activity across the vendors in the benchmark. So the alliance picture is interesting for space because we have identified Google and Adobe as the alliance partners of choice for most of the vendors in the benchmark. Google is what kind of gives the platform, the technology capabilities. As you can see, PwC, Deloitte, CGI, Capgemini, AKQA, Ogilvy, Digital, all the vendors listed are partnering with Google, but for different reasons. So, for example, Digital acts as a Google Analytics premium reseller, while PwC's partnership is more of a, I call it a concierge consultant for Google platform, where the next technology vendor is Adobe. And that's an interesting finding on our end here that all the vendors in the benchmark, but the strategy-led houses, with the exception of PwC that we have also in the strategy group, don't have established, or we have identified partnership with Adobe, which I think is an interesting play. It's certainly an area where it's an opportunity for those strategy-led houses to tap into Adobe's marketing cloud. And if they decide to go and be more of a holistic view, they have certainly a partnership they can explore and be after. Then we have the third group is the niche vendors. few examples here: Axion, Radian6, Actron, Apigee. What the niche vendors in that category is allows them to develop that really deep capabilities for specifics. So, for example, social listening to content management development, and kind of allow them to be from the broader picture and holistic view to specific capabilities. That's kind of the niche vendors that provide to the players in the benchmark. And the last group, we call them competition, primate, so to speak. We have Accenture IBM partnership. We have Ogilvy and IBM, and Deloitte and IBM. We kind of put IBM on the right because all the vendors are using IBM for technology platforms in terms of capabilities in that space. Just to kind of illustrate that, yeah, they do go head-to-head sometimes and they compete against each other, but they also partner just to kind of, you know what, there is an opportunity for everyone to play in that space. Just have to identify your strengths and pursue the right one that you need to. Without turning over back to Patrick.
Excellent, thank you. So we're getting towards the end of this presentation, and I just wanted to explain where our portfolio is with digital marketing services. This shows you the key deliverables. We're talking today about the benchmark. We'll be doing a customer satisfaction, a customer research survey report later on this year, and we do vendor commentaries, vendor profiles reports all the time. We issue about one a month on a digital marketing services vendor. So far we've covered Sapient Nitro, PwC, and Accenture. We'll be doing McKinsey in about a week and rolling out Ogilvy and Mather and probably IBM and others as we go forward over the course of the year. These are the kinds of things you can reach out to us and get further details on. We'll do this benchmark semi-annually, so we'll be talking to everybody here again in about 6 months once we roll the next one of these out. And as you heard from Stuart and Boz, there is so much flux and change and confusion in the market right now that I anticipate as we roll out the next benchmark, we'll probably have added and dropped vendors in the space, and we will have added and dropped the way that we look at the entire market. It's that confusing. So the last thing we want to show, this is the full scope of the benchmark itself. You can see all the vendors that are in it. Boz talked about the vendors in groups, and then he talked about some specific alliances and acquisitions. But you can see there's a few vendors here, at least, that haven't even come up in this presentation. I mentioned at the very beginning the definitions around the 4 segments, the 4 service lines. And then you can see all the metrics that we break out. This benchmark comes with a spreadsheet that's got all of this stuff laid out for you. And we include data for going all the way back to 4Q of 2013 to allow that historical perspective and understanding that for some of these vendors, that was really the very beginning of their digital marketing services portfolio, even if they had been doing other digital transformation work prior to that. So with that, I think we'll now turn it over to questions. Justin, what do we have?
All right. So the first question: What about Salesforce Marketing Cloud and Oracle's Marketing Cloud?
And what about Adobe's Marketing Cloud? There's a whole series of vendors. You know, SAP is going to make a push in this area. They have Connect CRM and hybrids. There's a series of these more traditional but very technically savvy and strong presence in enterprise accounts vendors, right? So they're recognizing this opportunity as well. This benchmark specifically is about professional and IT services around these areas. We're working on launching another benchmark that looks at the vendors, the tech vendors in this space. So it would be a marketing tech benchmark that would look at the platform vendors across it. That's a big space. There's a lot of subsegments in that area. But to speak about this, there are huge alliance opportunities. And as we know, you know, there's a Salesforce event going on. There's a tour going on right now. Oracle just wrapped up their tour in Las Vegas a week ago. They recognize that the CMOs are pivoting around this function, that they want not just a single tool, but also they need to get transparency. They need auditability. They need governance of the volumes of data that are coming through. And it's not just PII, personally identifiable information, but also that there's all kinds of other IoT and other data that are coming in from devices that give them insight into customer behavior. And it's not just in the B2C space, but it's also in the B2B space. So if you want to talk about those firms, happy to take that on the sideboard. But I want to keep today's focus on the professional service firms that are providing that wrapper around the implementation of all these types of platforms.
All right. The next question, does this benchmark include geographic splits? And if so, can you talk to trends in APAC?
Yes, it does. And I think we probably didn't mention so much about geography so far, but it does have, we do look at the benchmark in terms of for the three core geos, Americas, EMEA, and APAC. It's interesting you pointed out APAC. I'm trying to think, because of our revenue size, it's still the smallest size of the market comparing to Americas, led by North America, and EMEA, led by the Western continental Europe countries. What's happening in APAC is interesting from a view of, like, I think Australia is where it's happening in terms of digital marketing services. We have seen a lot of traction in terms of investment. We know that Deloitte Digital, when we first launched Deloitte Digital back in 2012, they launched it in Australia. Accenture recently purchased the Reactive Media in Australia. BCG also has pursued push in Australia as well, and it just what we think is happening in Australia is it's a developed market, it's a small scale. We believe that could be a test bed from vendors to be like, okay, you know what? There's a market that is similar in developed from a macroeconomic perspective for our capabilities. Why don't we try out technologies, approaches, services that we can possibly scale up on a global base. So it's a very dynamic market. I think it's the smallest one, but Australia is certainly a market that provides a lot of opportunities for vendors.
Let's take the outsourcing question.
All right.
Go ahead. Do you want to read it out loud?
Yes. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, the one. So one of the questions that came in is, do you anticipate covering digital marketing operations outsourcing in the benchmark? So that's basically BPO. We actually cover BPO in a lot of different places within TBR. It's part of our IT services benchmark. It's part of our global delivery benchmark. We do syndicated quarterly reports on all of the largest and the most active IT services providers, and BPO is part of that that analysis every single time. So I don't anticipate that we're going to segment out outsourcing within this particular benchmark, but it's something if there's a particular question on a particular client, on a particular vendor, we'd be happy to follow up directly offline on that and discuss what exactly you're looking for with respect to outsourcing. So I think well, for one thing, it's a rabbit hole we could go down and get lost, and I'd much rather do that when we have the opportunity to bring all of the different research that we have to bear on it.
Just to add on to that, I mean, in terms of the lines of business that are currently covered in the DMS benchmark, web, mobile, and commerce, advertising, analytics, those two lines of business partially cover what could be viewed traditionally as an application outsourcing services. So there is a component already that someone seen that writing the code and kind of cover up those services. So there's a portion that just to kind of clarify as well.
There was another question that came in. How would you compare IBM Interactive experience versus Accenture Interactive in terms of scope? Sounds like IBM Interactive is broader than only a digital marketing agency practice. For example, IBM Teams involved with IBM Verse, Social Internet. Yeah. Again, another great question that we tackle in a few different ways. We look at IBM individually every quarter. We also have IBM in our IT services benchmark, management consulting benchmark, global delivery benchmark, this benchmark, I'm trying to think, business intelligence benchmark, and Accenture we cover the same way as well. So we have a sort of exhaustive coverage of both of those companies. And again, what I'd love to do is understand a little bit more about where this question is coming from and whether you're looking for sort of a side-by-side comparison of capabilities, or you're looking more for the metrics around how each of those practices have evolved, what kind of revenues they're generating, what kind of headcount is developed to, or devoted to it, and then what kind of investment both of those companies have had to make in order to build those practices up. So we'll take this question offline and get back. Stuart's got a comment, though.
Yeah, I mean, certainly IBM has a product portfolio space that they're working on this, but Accenture does not, right? So when we're looking at the mapping of IBM's digital marketing services, we're not mapping in the product-based revenue here. So this is just purely service-based revenue that we're mapping in for all of these vendors here, albeit strategically, you know, IBM has their teams working together on product side, and it obviously pays off for them in terms of being able to promote their own dog food, so to speak. So Accenture is a little bit more broadly based. There's also a question around, you know, what IT service providers were aligning with Salesforce and Oracle, as well as some of the agencies, right? So had some people talking about that. So there are, if you are in the agency function, right, a lot of the creative and branding teams need to work across multiple platforms, particularly the agencies themselves will have different teams who are working with different technology providers, and they'll have to align those teams virtually to get to align with the customer's technology platforms, as well as aligning with their own internal technology platforms. So this is a lot of friction for those people who are involved in the service delivery piece. So we see that there's when you have 30 or 40 different, vendors that you have to, primary vendors that you got to work with, and then bring in specialists, it adds a lot of overhead, and people are going to wanting more out-of-the-box integration, more common standards, perhaps more open and transparent file formats. There's a lot of areas where friction could be reduced in this space. So we have another question here. Interesting point on geographies. Don't you believe European agencies lag behind IT service providers and consulting firms, mostly U.S., as European CMOs lag in digital marketing adoption against U.S. CMOs? Right. So this is a demand drive side of the question. We actually have some customer research that's in the field right now around the adoption and utilization of digital marketing services. And we're looking at UK, Germany, and France specifically to kind of use them as a bellwether. So in general, we do find that most of the technologies, lag a little bit in Europe, particularly some areas of Western Europe, just because there's complexity in that market that is built in with the national and regional and industrial interconnects that need to happen, as opposed to the broader and we think much simpler U.S./Canada market.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of dissimilarities and similarities at the same time. In Europe, you have 47+ countries in Europe that you have to kind of adjust to their local market and the culture fit, essentially. So it does take a little more effort and a different spend in that regards to attract those customers.
Huge. There are much higher regulatory and governance rules here, particularly when you have not just data within a country, but people moving from country to country and doing service delivery. It's just another layer of complexity that international marketing officers really need to wrestle with.
Yeah, that's one of those ideas that European CMOs lag U.S. CMOs in terms of digital marketing services adoption. That when we do the customer study, I think one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to see that that lagging is far more dramatic than we thought it was, or it's actually a lot less than we thought it was. It may show that that's a perception that has actually been overcome by efforts by the ad agencies and the strategy firms we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean the agencies themselves work in local markets. They've been in play. Their holding company strategies lend themselves to local business and being able to deploy and solve these problems locally. So there are elements of this service market that are already adapted to dealing with the complexities of the local markets.
All right. I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
So why don't you capture all the Publicis companies into one for this benchmark?
Well, Publicis, the holding company, has, I believe, over 150 independently run agencies. So it does provide with a broader spectrum, but the other piece of the equation is we're trying to map agencies versus IT services-led versus strategy-led companies. So the portfolio, you can imagine, to kind of come up to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges, it does create challenges when you have 150 agents, separate agencies of the Publicis group, for example, that they may have small pieces of that bigger portfolio, but the one we have identified have the closest in terms of portfolio offerings to what the other two groups are offering. And that kind of goes back to what we mentioned earlier about someone like Publicis Group or WPP or Omnicom, developing more of a holistic approach and that consolidation across the agencies that we may see in the future.
And I think anytime we do a benchmark, we have to make decisions about which vendors are in and which vendors are out. And we typically make that decision around revenue and activity, but in the case of digital marketing services, we threw the net a little wider so that we could capture, and if you look at the data, it shows the huge disparity between a McKinsey on one end and an Ogilvy and Mather on the other in terms of pure straight revenue. But we included some of those smaller practices only because they're more active, they're growing faster, they're disrupting the market. And in order to do that, and in order to look at vendors as Boz said, a kind of an apples-to-apples way, we had to separate out those pieces of Publicis and WPP and Omnicom that actually fit within the benchmark in the way that we're trying to make those comparisons.
All right, well, thank you, Boz, Patrick, and Stuart, and thanks, everyone, for your questions. You can follow the analyst and TBR on the Twitter handle listed here, and please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well. Additionally, before we sign off, I'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. Your feedback would be greatly appreciated. We'll leave the chat function open for another few minutes for people to ask last-minute questions. Thanks for joining today's session.